Hello and welcome to Classical Titerature, the show where I had an introduction written out, and then my computer restarted. The last time we checked in with King Arthur, he took 5 dudes like an absolute champ, all in the span of one day, sending them back to the castle to serve his lady love, Guinevere. This time, we will see how they all fare under Guinevere's guidance and Arthur's secret supervision. Chapter 4th. How the 4 knights served the Lady Guinevere. Now, when King Arthur returned to Camelard once more, which fell upon the afternoon of a second day, he found the gardener waiting for him, exceedingly filled with wrath. And the gardener had a long birchen rod, which he had fetched thither for to punish his boy withal, when that he should have returned to the garden again. So when he saw King Arthur, he said, "Thou knave, wherefore didst thou quit thy work to go a-gadding?" And King Arthur laughed, and said, "Touch me not." At this the gardener waxed so exceedingly wroth, that he catched the king by the collar of his jerkin, with intent to beat him, saying, "Dost thou laugh at me, knave, and make a mock at me? Now I will beat thee well for the offence thou hast committed." Then, when King Arthur felt that man's hand laid upon him, and when he heard the words that the gardener spake in his wrath, his royal spirit waxed very big within him, and he cried out, "Ha, wretch, wouldst thou dare to lay thy hands upon my sacred person?" So saying, he seized the gardener by the wrists, and took the rod straight away from him, and struck him with it across the shoulders. And when that poor knave felt himself thus, in the powerful grasp of the angry king, and when he felt the rod upon his shoulders, he straightway lifted up a great outcry, albeit the blow hurt him not a whit. "Now get thee gone," quoth King Arthur, "and trouble me no more, else I will serve thee in a way that will not at all be like thee." Herewith he loosed that poor man and let him go, and the gardener was so bemazed with terror that both the earth and the sky swam before him. For King Arthur's eyes had flashed upon him like lightning, and those 2 hands that held his wrists were with wonderful power. Wherefore, when the king let him go, he gat him away as quickly as might be, all trembling and sweating with a great fear. So he went straight to the Lady Guinevere, and complained to her of the manner in which she had been treated. "Lady," quoth he, weeping with the memory of his terror, "my boy goeth away for a day or more, I know not whither. And when I would whip him for quitting his work, he taketh the rod straight away from me, and beateth me with it. Wherefore now, I prithee, deal with him as is fitting, and let several strong men drive him away from this place with rods." Then the Lady Guinevere laughed. "Let be," she said, "and meddle with him no more, for indeed he appeareth to be a very saucy fellow. As for thee, take thou no heed of his coming or his going, and haply I will deal with him in such a way as shall be fitting." Whereupon the gardener went his way, greatly marvelling that the Lady Guinevere should be so mild in dealing with that toward knave. And the Lady Guinevere went her way, very merry, for she began to bethink her that there was soothly some excellent reason why it should happen that when the white champion, who did such wonderful deeds, should come thither, then that gardener's boy should go, and that when that same champion should go, then the gardener's boy should come thitherward again. Wherefore she suspected many things, and was wonderfully merry and cheerful of spirit. Now that day in the afternoon, the Lady Guinevere chanced to walk in the garden with her damsels, and with her walked those 4 noble knights who had been sent thither by her white champion, to wit, Sir Gawain, Sir Owain, Sir Geraint, and Sir Pelleas. And the gardener's lad was digging in the gardens, and as they passed by where he was, the Lady Guinevere laughed aloud and cried out, "Look, look, messieurs and ladies! Yonder is a very saucy fellow for to be a gardener's lad, for he continually weareth his cap, even when he standeth in the presence of lords and ladies. Then Sir Gawain up and spake, saying, Is it even so? Now I will straightway go to yonder knave, and will take his hat off for him, and that in a way so greatly to his misliking, that I do not believe that he will ever offend by wearing it in our presence again. At this the Lady Guinevere laughed a very great deal. Let be, she said, let be, Sir Gawain. It would ill beseem one so gentle as thou art, to have to do with yonder saucy fellow. Moreover, he doth assure us all that he hath an ugly place upon his head, wherefore let him wear his cap in God's mercy. Thus the Lady Guinevere, though she suspected a very great deal, was yet pleased to make a mock of him whom she suspected. Now that day Duke Mordaunt of North Umber had entirely recovered from those sore hurts that he had suffered from his overthrow at the hands of the White Champion. Wherefore, the next morning having come, he appeared again before the castle as he had appeared aforetime, clad all in complete armour. So this time there rode before him 2 heralds, and when the Duke and the 2 heralds had come to that part of the meadows that lay immediately before the castle of Cameliard, the heralds blew their trumpets exceedingly loud. So at the sound of the trumpets many people came and gathered upon the walls, and King Leodegrance came and took stand upon a lesser tower that looked down upon the plain, where were the Duke of North Umber and the 2 heralds. Then the Duke of North Umber lifted up his eyes and beheld King Leodegrance where he stood over above him, upon the top of that tower, and he cried out in a loud voice, What ho, King Leodegrance! Thou shalt not think because I suffered a fall from my horse through the mischance of an assault at arms, that thou art therefore quit of me. Yet, natheless, I do now make this fair proffer unto thee. Tomorrow day I shall appear before this castle with 6 knights companion. Now, if thou hast any 7 knights who are able to stand against me and my companions in an assault at arms, whether with spears or swords, or a horse or a foot, then I shall engage myself for to give over all pretence whatsoever unto the hand of the Lady Guinevere. But if thou canst not provide such champions to contend successfully against me and my knights companion, then I shall not only lay claim to Lady Guinevere, but I shall likewise seize upon and shall hold for mine own 3 certain castles of thine that stand upon the borders of North Umber. And likewise I shall seize upon and shall hold for mine own all the lands and glebes appertaining unto those same castles. Moreover, this challenge of mine shall hold only until tomorrow at set of sun, after the which time it shall be null and void. Wherefore, King Leodegrance, thou hadst best look to it straightway to provide thee with such champions as may defend thee from these demands aforesaid. Hereupon those 2 heralds blew their trumpets once more, and the Duke Mordaunt of North Umber turned his horse about, and went away from that place. Then King Leodegrance also went his way, very sorrowful and downcast in his spirits, for he said to himself, Is it at all likely that another champion shall come unto me like that wonderful White Champion who came 2 days since, I know not whence, for to defend me against mine enemies? And, touching the same White Champion, if I know not whence he came, so I also know not whither he hath departed. How then shall I know where to seek him to beseech his further aid in this time of mine extremity? Wherefore he went his way, very sorrowful, and wist not what he was to do for to defend himself. So being thus exceedingly troubled in his spirit, he went straight unto his own room, and there shut himself therein. Nor would he see any man, nor speak unto any one, but gave himself over entirely unto sorrow and despair. Now in this extremity the Lady Guinevere bethought of her those 4 knights who had pledged for to serve her for 7 days. So she went unto them where they were, and she bespoke them in this wise. Messieurs, ye have been sent hither pledged for to serve me for 7 days. Now do I ordain it of thee, that you will take this challenge of Duke Mordaunt upon you at my behest, And I do much desire for you to go forth tomorrow day, for to meet this Duke of North Umber and his knights companion in battle. For ye are terribly powerful knights, and I do believe you may easily defend us against our enemies. But Sir Gawain said, Not so, lady, not so. For though we are pledged unto thy service, yet we are not pledged unto the service of King Leo de Grance, thy father. Nor have we quarrel of any sort with this Duke of North Umber, nor with his 6 knights companion. For we are knights of King Arthur, his court, nor may we, except at his command, take any foreign quarrel upon us in the service of another king. Then was the Lady Guinevere exceedingly angry, wherefore she said with great heat, Either thou art a wonderfully faithful lord unto thy king, Sir Gawain, or else thou fearest to meet this Duke of North Umber and his knights companion. And at this speech of the Lady Guinevere's, Sir Gawain was also exceedingly wroth, wherefore he made reply, An thou wert a knight and not a lady, Dame Guinevere, thou wouldest think 3 or 4 times ere thou wouldest find courage to speak with those words unto me. Whereupon he arose, and went from that place with a countenance all inflamed with wrath. And the Lady Guinevere went away also from that place, and to her bower, where she wept a very great deal, both from sorrow and from anger. Now all this while King Arthur had been very well aware of everything that passed, wherefore he by and by arose and went out, and found the gardener. And he took the gardener strongly by the collar of his coat, and held him where he was. And he said to him, Sirrah, I have a command to set upon thee, and thou shalt perform that command to the letter. Else, an thou perform it not, a very great deal of pain may befall thee. Herewith speaking, he thrust his hand into the bosom of his jerkin, and brought forth thence that necklace of pearls which the Lady Guinevere had given him from about her neck. And he said further unto the gardener, Thou shalt take this necklace to the Lady Guinevere, and thou shalt say to her thus, that she is to send me forth with bread and meat and wine and comfits from her own table. And thou shalt say unto her that I desire her to summon those 4 knights, to wit, Sir Gawain, Sir Owain, Sir Geraint, and Sir Pelleas, and that she is to bid those 4 for to come and serve me with those things for my refreshment. And thou art to say unto her that she is to lay her commands upon those knights, that they are further to serve me according as I may command, and that henceforth to be my servants and not her servants. And these are the commands that I lay upon thee, that thou art to say these things unto the Lady Guinevere. Now when the gardener heard those words, he was so astonished that he wist not what to think, for he deemed that gardener's lad had gone altogether mad. Wherefore he lifted up his voice and cried aloud, How now? What is this thou sayest? Verily, should I do such a thing as this thou biddest me to do, either it will cost me my life, or else it will cost thee thy life. For who would dare to say such words unto the Lady Guinevere? But King Arthur said, Natheless, thou shalt surely do as I command thee, sirrah. For if thou disobey in one single point, then I do assure thee it will go exceedingly ill with thee. For I have suffered it in my power for to make thee suffer as thou hast never suffered before. And upon this the gardener said, I will go. For he said unto himself, If I do as this fellow biddeth me, then will the Lady Guinevere have him punished in great measure, and so I will be revenged upon him for what he did unto me yesterday. Moreover, it irks me exceedingly that I should have a lad for to work in the garden who behaves as this fellow does. Wherefore, he said, I will go. So he took that necklace of pearls that King Arthur gave him, and he went forth, and after a while he found the Lady Guinevere where she was. And when he had found her, he bespoke her in this wise, Lady, my garden boy hath assuredly gone entirely mad. For, under the threat of certain great harm he would do unto me, and I performed not his errand, he hath sent me to offer a very grievous affront unto thee. For he hath sent me with this string of large beads for to give to thee. He bids me to tell thee that thou art to send to him bread and meat and sweetmeats and wine, such as thou usest at thine own table. And he bids me to tell thee that these things are to be served to him by the 4 noble knights who came thither the day before yesterday. And he saith that thou art to command those same knights that they are to obey him in whatsoever he may command, for that they are henceforth to be his servants and not thine. And indeed, lady, he would listen to naught that I might say to him contrawise. But he hath threatened me with dire injury, and I not come hither and delivered this message unto thee. Now when the Lady Guinevere heard what the gardener said, and when she beheld the necklace which she had given unto that white champion, and when she wist that the white champion and the gardener's boy were indeed one, she was uplifted with an exceeding joy, wherefore she knew not whether to laugh or whether to weep for that pure joy. So she arose and took the necklace of pearls, and she bade the gardener for to come with her. Then she went forth until she found those 4 knights, and, when she had found them, she spake unto them thus: My lords, a while sin when I commanded you for to take my quarrel with Duke Mordaunt of Northumber upon you for my sake, ye would not do so. And thou, my lord Gawain, didst speak such angry words as are not fitting that one who serveth should speak unto his mistress, far less than a knight should speak unto the daughter of a king. Accordingly, I have it in my mind that ye shall perform a certain thing by way of penance, which, an ye refuse to do, I will know very well that ye do not intend to fulfill that word which you plighted to my knight when he overthrew you all 4 in fair combat. Now my command is this, that ye take certain food prepared for my table, meats and white bread and sweetmeats and wine, and that ye take that food unto my gardener's boy, whose cap, Sir Gawain, thou didst threaten so valorously, for to take away from him this very morning. And ye 4 are to serve the food unto him as though he were a royal knight. And when ye have so served him, ye are to obey him in whatsoever he may ordain. And this I put upon ye as a penalty, because ye took not my quarrel upon ye as true knights should, for hereafter ye are to be servants unto that gardener's boy, and not unto me. Wherefore ye are now to go unto the buttery of the castle, and ye are to bid the sewer for to give you meats such as are served upon mine own table. And the food ye are to serve upon silver plates, and the wine ye are to serve in silver cups and goblets. And ye are to minister unto that gardener's boy as though he were a great lord of exceeding fame and renown. Thus spake the Lady Guinevere, and when she had spoken, she turned and left those 4 knights, and she took with her the gardener, who was so astonished at that which he had heard, that he wist not whether he had gone mad, or whether the Lady Guinevere had gone mad. And the Lady Guinevere bade the gardener to go to the gardener's boy, and to tell him that all things should be fulfilled accordingly to his commands. And so the gardener did as he was told. Now turn we to those 4 knights whom Lady Guinevere had left, for they were bemazed and abashed at the singular commands she had set upon them. And when they recovered from their amazement, they were inflamed with exceeding indignation that, for the time, they wist not whether that which they saw with their eyes was the light of day, or whether it was altogether darkness. Nor could one of them look at another in the face, so overcome were they with shame at the affront that had been put upon them. Then up and spake Sir Gawain, and his voice so trembled with his exceeding anger that he could scarce contain it for to speak his words. Messieurs, quoth he, do ye not see how that this lady hath wantonly put a great affront upon us, because we would not do that which she this morning bade us to do, and because we would not take up her quarrel against the Duke of Northumber? Now we will indeed serve this gardener's boy even as she hath ordained, for we will serve him with meat and drink as she hath commanded, and we will render our services unto him as she hath bidden us to do. But observe ye, we are no longer her servants, but we are his servants, wherefore we may serve him as we choose for to do. So, when we have fulfilled her commands, and have served him with meat and drink, and when we have obeyed all the behests he layeth upon us, then do I make my vow that I, with mine own hand, shall slay that gardener's boy. And when I have slain him, I will put his head into a bag, and I will send that bag unto the Lady Guinevere by the meanest carrier whom I can find for that purpose. and so this proud lady shall receive an affront as great as that affront which she hath put upon us. And they all said that that which Sir Gawain had planned should be exactly as he had said. So those four lords went unto the sewer of the castle, and they asked for the best of that food which was to be served to the Lady Guinevere, meats and bread and sweetmeats and wine. Then they took them silver plates and platters, and they placed the food upon them. And they took silver cups and silver goblets, and they poured the wine into them. And they went forth with those things. And when they had come back of the castle nigh to the stables, they found the gardener's boy, and they bade him sit down, and eat, and to drink. And they waited upon him as though he had been some great lord, and not one of those four knights wist who he was, nor that he was the great king whose servant they, soothly, were. For he wore his cap of disguise upon his head, wherefore they deemed him to be only a poor peasant fellow. Now when Sir Owain beheld that he still wore his cap before them, he spake unto him with great indignation, saying, Ha, villain! Wouldst thou wear thy cap even in the presence of great princes and lords such as we? Unto this Sir Gawain said, Let it be, it matters not. And then he said very bitterly unto the gardener's boy, Eat thou well, sirrah, for thou shalt hardly eat another meal of food upon this earth. To this the gardener's boy made reply, Sir knight, that, haply, shall lie unto another will than thine for to determine. For maybe I shall eat many other meals than this, and maybe ye shall serve at them as ye are serving me now. And those four lords were astonished beyond measure that he should bespeak them thus so calmly and without any appearance of fear. Then, after he had eaten, the gardener's boy said unto those knights, Behold, messieurs, I have had enough, and am done. And now I will have other commands for you to fulfill. And my next command is that ye shall make ready straightway to go abroad with me. And to that end ye shall clothe yourself with complete armor. And thou, Sir Gawain, shalt go to the head stable-keeper of this castle, and thou shalt demand of him that he shall make ready the Lady Guinevere's palfrey, so that I may straightway ride forth upon it. And when ye are all encased in your armor, and when everything is duly appointed according to my command, ye shall bring that palfrey unto the postern gate of the castle, and there I shall meet thee for to ride forth with you. And Sir Gawain said, It shall be done in every way according as thou dost command. But when we ride forth from this castle, it shall be a very sorry journey for thee. And the gardener's boy said, I think not so, Sir Gawain. Then those four went away, and did according as the gardener's boy commanded. And when they had made themselves ready in full array of armor, and when they had obtained the Lady Guinevere's palfrey, they went unto the postern gate, and there the gardener's boy met them. And when he saw that they sat their horses, and that they moved not at his coming, he said, Ha, messieurs, would ye so entreat him who ye have been ordered to serve? Now I do bid ye, Sir Gawain and Sir Owain, for to come down and to hold my stirrup for me. And I bid ye, Sir Geraint and Sir Pelleas, for to come down and to hold my palfrey for me whiles I mount. And those four noble knights did as they were commanded. And Sir Gawain said, Thou mayest command as thou dost list, and I do bid thee to make the most of it while thou mayest do so. For thou shalt have but a little while longer for to enjoy the great honour that hath fallen upon thee. For that honour which has fallen upon thee, lo, it shall presently crush thee unto death. And the gardener's boy said, Not so. I believe I shall not die yet whiles. And again those four lords were greatly astonished at the calmness of his demeanour. And so they rode forth from that place, and the gardener's boy would not permit that they should ride either before him or beside him, but he commanded that they should ride behind him, whilst they were still servants unto him. So they rode as he assigned them for a considerable way. Then, after they had gone forward a great distance, they drew nigh to a gloomy and dismal woodland that lay entirely beyond the country coadjacent to Camelard. Then, when they had come nigh unto this woodland, Sir Gawain rode a little forward, and he said, Sir gardener's boy, seest thou yonder woodland? Now when we come into it, thou shalt immediately die, and that by a sword that hath never yet been touched by any but noble or knightly blood. And King Arthur turned about in his saddle, and he said, Ha, Sir Gawain, wouldst thou ride forward thus when I bid thee to ride behind me? And as he spake, he took the cap from off his head. And lo, they all beheld that it was King Arthur who rode with them. Then a great silence of pure astonishment fell upon them all, and each man sat as though he were turned into an image of stone. And it was King Arthur who first spake, and he said, Ha! How now, sir knights? Have ye no words of greeting for to pay me? Certes, ye have served me with a very ill grace this day. Moreover, ye have threatened to slay me. And now, when I speak to you, ye say naught in reply. Then those four knights immediately cried out aloud, and they leapt down from their horses, and they kneeled down into the dust of the road. And when King Arthur beheld them kneeling there, he laughed with great joyfulness of spirit, and he bade them for to mount their horses again, for the time was passing by when there was much to do. So they mounted their horses and rode away. And as they journeyed forward, the king told them all that had befallen him, so that they were greatly amazed, and gave much acclaim unto the knightliness with which he had borne himself in those excellent adventures through which he had passed. And they rejoiced greatly that they had a king for to rule over them, who was possessed of such a high and knightly spirit. So they rode to that arm of the forest where King Arthur had left his horse and his armor. Chapter 5th. How King Arthur overcame the enemies of King Leodegrance, and how his royalty was proclaimed. Now, when the next day had come, the Duke of North Umber and 6 knights companion appeared upon the field in front of the castle of Cameliard, as he had duly declared that he and they would do. And those 7 champions appeared in a very great estate, for in front of them rode 7 heralds with trumpets and tabards, and behind them there rode 7 squires, each squire bearing the spear, the shield, the crest, and the banneret of the knight, who was his lord and master. And the 7 heralds blew their trumpets so exceedingly loud, that the sound thereof penetrated unto the utmost parts of Cameliard, so that the people came running from everywhere. And when the heralds blew their trumpets, the 7 squires shouted, and waved the spears and the bannerets. So those 7 knights rode in such proud estate, that those who looked upon them had hardly ever beheld such a splendid presentment of chivalry. So they paraded up and down that field 3 times for its entire length, and meantime a great crowd of people, called thither by the blowing of the heralds' trumpets, stood upon the walls, and gazed therefrom at that noble spectacle. And all the court of King Rience came, and stood upon the plain in front of the king's pavilion, and they shouted and cheered the Duke of North Umber, and his 6 knights companion. Meanwhile, King Leodegrance of Cameliard was so cast down with trouble and shame that he did not choose to show his face, but hid himself away from all his court, nor would he permit anyone for to come into his presence at that time. Nevertheless, the Lady Guinevere, with sundry of her damsels, went unto the king's closet where he was, and knocked upon the door thereof. And when the king denied her to come in to him, she spake to him through the door, giving him words of good cheer, saying, My lord king and father, I pray thee for to look up, and to take good cheer unto thyself. For I do assure thee that there is one who hath our cause in his hands, and that one is, certes, a very glorious champion, and he shall assuredly come by and by ere this day is done, and when he cometh, he shall certainly overthrow our enemies. But King Leodegrance opened not the door, but he said, My daughter, that which thou sayest for to comfort me. for there is no other help for me in this time of trouble, only God, his good strong help and grace. And she said, Nay, I say that which is the truth, and the help that God shall send unto thee he shall certainly send through a worthy champion, who at this moment hath our cause in his hand. So spake the Lady Guinevere, so that whilst King Leodegrance came not forth, yet he was greatly comforted at that which she said to him. Thus passed all that morning and a part of the afternoon, and yet no one appeared for to take up that challenge which the 7 knights had declared. But, whilst the sun was still yet 3 or 4 hours high, there suddenly appeared at a great distance a cloud of dust. And in that cloud of dust there presently appeared 5 knights, riding at great speed thitherward. And when these had come nigh unto the walls, the people beheld that he who rode foremost of all was that same white champion, who aforetime overthrown the Duke of Northumber. Moreover, they perceived that the 4 knights who rode with that white champion were very famous knights, and of great prowess and glory of arms. For one was Sir Gawain, and the other was Sir Owain, and the other was Sir Geraint, and the other was Sir Pelleas. For the people of the castle and the town knew those 4 knights, because they had dwelt for 2 days at Camelard, and they were of such exceeding renown that folk crowded from far and near for to look upon them whensoever they appeared for to walk abroad. So, when the people upon the walls beheld who those knights were, and when they perceived that white champion who had aforetime brought them such exceeding honour, they shouted aloud for a second time, with a voice mightier than that with which they had the first time shouted. Now King Leodegrance heard the people shouting, whereupon hope awoke of a sudden within him. So he straightway came forth with all speed for to see what was ado, and there he beheld those 5 noble champions about to enter into the field below the castle walls. And the Lady Guinevere also heard the shouting, and she came forth likewise, and behold, there was that white champion and those 4 other knights. So that when she beheld that white knight and his 4 companions at arms, her heart was like to break within her for pure joy and gladness, wherefore she wept for the passion thereof, and laughed the whiles she wept. And she waved her kerchief unto those 5 noble lords, and kissed her hand unto them, and the 5 knights saluted her as they rode past her and into the field. Now, when the Duke of Northumber was made aware that those 5 knights had come against him, and his knights companions, for to take up his challenge, he straightway came forth from his pavilion and mounted his horse. And his knights companion came forth and mounted their horses, and he and they went forth for to meet those who had come against him. And when the Duke of Northumber had come nigh enough, he perceived that the chiefest of those 5 knights was the white champion who had aforetime overthrown him. Wherefore he said unto that white champion, Sir knight, I have once before condescended unto thee, who art altogether unknown to me or to anybody else that is here. For without inquiring concerning thy quality, I ran a course with thee, and lo, by the chance of arms, thou didst overthrow me. Now this quarrel is more serious than that, wherefore I and my companions at arms will not run a course with thee and thy companions, nor will we fight with thee until I first know what is the quality of him against whom I contend. Wherefore I bid thee presently declare thyself, who thou art, and what is thy condition. Then Sir Gawain opened the umbril of his helmet, and he said, Sir knight, behold my face, and know that I am Gawain, the son of King Lot. Wherefore thou mayest perceive that my condition and estate are even better than thine own. Now I do declare unto thee that yonder white knight is of such a quality that he condescends unto thee when he doeth combat with thee, and that thou dost not condescend unto him. Oh, Sir Gawain, quoth the Duke of Umber, what thou sayest is a very strange thing, for indeed there are few in this world who are so exalted that they may condescend unto me. Natheless, since thou dost avouch for him, I may not gainsay that which thou sayest. Yet there is still another reason why we may not fight with ye. For behold, we are 7 well approved and famous knights, and ye are but 5. So consider how unequal are our forces, and that you stand in great peril in undertaking so dangerous an encounter. Then Sir Gawain smiled right grimly upon that Duke of Northumber. Gramercy, for thy compassion, and for the tenderness which thou showeth concerning our safety, Sir Duke, quoth he. But natheless thou mayest leave that matter unto us with entire content of spirit upon thy part. For I consider that the peril in which ye 7 stand is full equal to our peril. Moreover, wert thou other than a belted knight, a simple man might suppose that thou wert more careful of thine own safety in this matter than thou art of ours. Now at these words the countenance of the Duke of Northumber became altogether covered with red, for he wist that he had, indeed, no great desire for this battle, wherefore he was ashamed because of the words which Sir Gawain spake to him. So each knight closed his helmet, and all turned their horses, and the one party rode unto one end of the field, and the other party rode to the other end of the field, and there each took stand in the places assigned to them. And they arranged themselves thus. In the middle was King Arthur, and upon either hand were 2 knights, and in the middle was the Duke of Northumber, and upon either hand were 3 knights. And when they had thus arrayed themselves, they dressed their spears and their shields, and made them altogether ready for the onset. Then King Arthur and Duke Mordaunt each shouted aloud, and the one party hurled upon the other party with such violence that the ground shook and thundered beneath the hoofs of the horses, and the clouds of dust rose up against the heavens. And so they met in the middle of the field with an uproar of such dreadful violence that one might have heard the crashing thereof for the distance of more than a mile away. And when the one party had passed the other, and the dust of the encounter had arisen, lo, 3 of the 7 had been overthrown, and not one of the 5 had lost his seat. And one of those who had been overthrown was Duke Mordaunt of Northumber. And behold, he never more arose again from the ground whereon he lay. For King Arthur had directed his spear into the very midst of his defences, and the spear had held, wherefore the point thereof had pierced the shield of the Duke of Northumber, and had pierced his body armour, and so violent was the stroke that the Duke of Northumber had been lifted entirely out of his saddle, and had been cast a full spear's length behind the crupper of his horse. Thus died that wicked man, for as King Arthur drave past him, the evil soul of him quitted his body with a weak noise, like to the squeaking of a bat, and the world was well rid of him. Now when King Arthur turned him about at the end of the course, and beheld that there were but 4 knights left upon their horses of all those 7 against whom he and his companions had driven, he uplifted his spear, and drew rein upon his horse, and bespake his knights in this wise: Messires, I am aweary of all this coil and quarrelling, and do not care to fight any more today. So go ye straightway and engage those knights in battle. As for me, I will abide here and witness your adventure. Lord, said they, we will do our endeavour as thou dost command. So those 4 good knights did as he commanded, and they went forth straightway against those other 4, much encouraged that their king looked upon their endeavour. And King Arthur sat with the butt of his spear resting upon his instep, and looked upon the field with great content of spirit and a steadfast countenance. As for those 4 knights companions that remained of the Duke of Northumber's party, they came not forth to the second encounter with so much readiness of spirit as they had done aforetime, for they were now well aware of how great was the excellent prowess of those other knights, and they beheld that their enemy came forth to the second encounter very fiercely, and with great valour and readiness of spirit. Wherefore their hearts melted away within them with doubt and anxiety as to the outcome of this second encounter. Nevertheless, they prepared themselves with such resolve as might be, and came forth as they were called upon to do so. Then Sir Gawain drave straight up to the foremost knight, who was a very well-known champion, hight Sir Dinador of Montcalm, And when he had come sufficiently nigh to him, he lifted him up in his stirrups, and he smote Sir Dinador so fierce a blow that he cleft the shield of that knight asunder, and he cleft his helmet, and a part of the blade of his sword brake away, and remained therein. And when Sir Dinador felt that blow, his brains swam like water, and he was fain to catch the horn of his saddle for to save himself from falling therefrom. Then a great terror straightway fell upon him, so that he drew rein violently to one side. So he fled away from that place, with the terror of death hanging above him, like to a black cloud of smoke. And when his companions beheld that stroke that Sir Gawain delivered, and when they beheld Sir Dinador flee away from before him, they also drew rein to one side and fled away with all speed, pursued with an entire terror of their enemies. And Sir Gawain and Sir Owain and Sir Geraint and Sir Pelleas pursued them as they fled. And they chased them straight through the court of King Rience, so that the knights and nobles of that court scattered hither and thither like chaff at their coming. And they chased those fleeing knights in among the pavilions of King Rience's court, and no man stayed them. And when they had chased those knights entirely away, they returned to that place where King Arthur still held his station, steadfastly awaiting them. Now, when the people of Camelard beheld the overthrow of their enemies, and when they beheld how those enemies fled away from before the faces of their champions, they shouted with might and main, and made great acclaim. Nor did they stint their loud shouting, when those 4 knights returned from pursuing their enemies, and came back unto the white champion again. And still more did they give acclaim when those 5 knights rode across the drawbridge, and into the gateway of the town, and into the town. Thus ended the great bout at arms, which was one of the most famous in all the history of chivalry of King Arthur's court. Now, when King Arthur had thus accomplished his purposes, and when he had come into the town again, he went unto that merchant of whom he had obtained the armor that he wore, and he delivered that armor back to him again. And he said, "Tomorrow day, Sir Merchant, I shall send thee 2 bags of gold for the rent of that armor, which thou didst let me have." To this the merchant said, "Lord, it is not needed that thou shalt recompense me for that armor, for thou hast done great honor unto Camelard by thy prowess." But King Arthur said, "Have done, Sir Merchant, nor must thou forbid what I say. Wherefore, take thou that which I shall send unto thee." Thereupon he went his way, and having set his cap of disguise upon his head, he came back into the Lady Guinevere's gardens again. Now when the next morning had come, the people of Camelard looked forth, and lo! King Rience had departed entirely away from before the castle. For that night he had struck his pavilions, and had withdrawn his court, and had gone away from that place where he and his people had sat down for 5 days past. And with him he had taken the body of the Duke of Northumber, conveying it away in a litter surrounded by many lighted candles, and uplifted by a peculiar pomp of ceremony. But when the people of Camelard beheld that he was gone, they were exceedingly rejoiced, and made merry, and shouted, and sang, and laughed. For they wist not how deeply enraged King Rience was against them. For his enmity aforetime towards King Leo de Grance was but as a small flame when compared unto the anger that now possessed him. Now, that morning, Lady Guinevere walked into her garden, and with her walked Sir Gawain and Sir Owain. And lo! there she beheld the gardener's boy again. Then she laughed aloud, and she said unto those 2 knights, "Messieurs, yonder is the gardener's boy, who weareth his cap continually, because he hath an ugly place upon his head." Then those 2 knights, knowing who the gardener's boy was, were exceedingly abashed at her speech, and wist not what to say or whither to look. And Sir Gawain spake, aside unto Sir Owain, and quoth he, "For heaven, that lady knoweth not what manner of man is yonder gardener's boy, for an she did, she would be more sparing of her speech." And the Lady Guinevere heard Sir Gawain that he spoke, but she did not hear his words. So she turned unto Gawain, and she said, Sir Gawain, haply it doth affront thee that that gardener's boy should wear his cap before us, and maybe thou wilt go and take it off from his head as thou didst offer to do 2 or 3 days since. And Sir Gawain said, Peace, lady, thou knowest not what thou sayest. Yonder gardener's boy could more easily take my head from off my shoulders than I could take his cap from off his head. At this the Lady Guinevere made open laughter, but in her heart she secretly pondered that saying, and greatly marvelled what Sir Gawain meant thereby. Now about noon of that day there came a herald from King Rience of North Wales, and he appeared boldly before King Leo de Grance, where the king sat in his hall with a number of his people about him. And the herald said, My lord king, my master, King Rience of North Wales, is greatly displeased with thee, for thou didst set certain knights upon Duke Mordaunt of Northumber, and those knights have slain that excellent nobleman, who was close kin unto King Rience. Moreover, thou hast made no reply to those demands that my master, King Rience, hath made touching the delivery unto him of certain lands and castles bordering upon North Wales, wherefore my master is affronted with thee beyond measure. So my master, King Rience, bids me to set forth to thee 2 conditions, and the conditions are these. Firstly, that thou dost immediately deliver into his hands that white knight who slew the Duke of Northumber. Secondly, that thou makest immediate promise that those lands in question shall be presently delivered unto King Rience. Then King Leo de Grance arose from where he sat, and spake to that herald with great dignity of demeanour. Sir Herald, quoth he, the demands that King Rience maketh upon me pass all bounds for insolence. That death which the Duke of Northumber suffered, he suffered because of his own pride and folly. Nor would I deliver that white knight into thy master's hands, even as I were able to do so. As for those lands that thy master demandeth of me, thou mayest tell King Rience that I will not deliver unto him of those lands so much as a single blade of grass, or a single grain of corn that groweth thereon. And the herald said, If so be that is thine answer, King Leo de Grance, then I am bidden for to tell thee that my master, King Rience of North Wales, will presently come hither with an array of a great force of arms, and will take from thee by force those things which thou wilt not deliver unto him peacefully. Whereupon, so saying, he departed thence and went his way. Now, after the herald had departed, King Leo de Grance went into his closet, and when he had come there, he sent, privily, for the Lady Guinevere. So the Lady Guinevere came to him where he was, and King Leo de Grance said to her, My daughter, it hath happened that a knight, clad all in white, and bearing no crest or device of any sort, hath twice come to our rescue, and hath overthrown our enemies. Now it is said by everybody that that knight is thine own particular champion, and I hear say that he wore thy necklace as a favour when he first went out against the Duke of Northumber. Now I prithee, daughter, tell me who that white champion is, and where he may be found. Then the Lady Guinevere was overwhelmed with a confusion, wherefore she looked away from her father's countenance. And she said, Verily, my lord, I know not who that knight may be. Then King Leo de Grance spake very seriously to the Lady Guinevere, and he took her by the hand and said, My daughter, thou art now of an age when thou must consider being mated unto a man who may duly cherish thee and protect thee from thine enemies. For lo, I grow apace in years, and may not hope to defend thee always from those perils that encompass one of our estate. Moreover, since King Arthur, who was a very great king indeed, hath brought peace unto this realm, all that noble court of chivalry which one time gathered about me has been scattered elsewhere, where greater adventures may be found than in my peaceful realm. Wherefore, as all the world hath seen this past week, I have now not one single knight whom I may depend upon to defend us in such times of peril as these, which now overshadow us. Now, my daughter, it doth appear to me that thou couldst not hope to find anyone who could so well safeguard thee as this white knight, for he doth indeed appear to be a champion of extraordinary prowess and strength. Wherefore it would be well if thou didst feel thyself to incline unto him as he appeareth to incline unto thee. Then the Lady Guinevere became all rosy red, as with a fire, even unto her throat. And she laughed, albeit the tears overflowed her eyes and ran down upon her cheeks. So she wept, yet laughed in weeping. And she said unto King Leodegrance, My lord and father, and I give my liking unto any one in the manner thou speakest of, I will give it only unto the poor gardener's boy who digs in my garden. Then, at these words, the countenance of King Leodegrance became contracted with violent anger, and he cried out, Ha, lady, wouldst thou make a mock and a jest of my words? Then the Lady Guinevere said, Indeed, my lord, I jest not and I mock not. Moreover, I tell thee for verity that the same gardener's boy knoweth more concerning the white champion than any one else in all of the world. Then King Leodegrance said, What is this that thou tellest me? And the Lady Guinevere said, Send for that gardener's boy, and thou shalt know. And King Leodegrance said, Verily, there is more in this than I may at present understand. So he called to him the chief of his pages, Dorasand, and he said to him, Go, Dorasand, and bring hither the gardener's boy from the Lady Guinevere's garden. So Dorasand, the page, went as King Leodegrance commanded, and in a little while he returned, bringing with him that gardener's boy. And with them came Sir Gawain, and Sir Owain, and Sir Pelleas, and Sir Geraint. And those four lords stood over against the door, where they entered. But the gardener's boy came and stood beside the table where King Leodegrance sat. And the king lifted up his eyes and looked upon the gardener's boy, and he said, Ha! Wouldst thou wear thy cap in our presence? Then the gardener's boy said, I cannot take off my cap. But the Lady Guinevere, who stood beside the chair of King Leodegrance, spake, and said, I do beseech thee, messire, for to take off thy cap unto my father. Whereupon the gardener's boy said, At thy bidding I will take it off. So he took the cap from off his head, and King Leodegrance beheld his face, and knew him. And when he saw who it was who stood before him, he made a great outcry from pure amazement, and he said, My lord and my king, what is this? Thereupon he arose from where he sat, and he went and kneeled down upon the ground before King Arthur. And he set the palms of his hands together, and he put his hands within the hands of King Arthur, and King Arthur took the hands of King Leodegrance within his own. And King Leodegrance said, my lord, is it then thou who hast done all these wonderful things? Then King Arthur said, Yea, such as those things were, I have done them. And he stooped and kissed King Leodegrance upon the cheek, and lifted him up unto his feet, and gave him words of good cheer. Now the Lady Guinevere, when she beheld those things that passed, was astonished beyond measure. And lo, she understood of a sudden all these things with amazing clearness. Wherefore a great fear fell upon her, so that she trembled exceedingly, and said unto herself, What things have I said unto this great king, and how I have made a mock of him and a jest of him before all those who were about me? And at the thought thereof she set her hand upon her side, for to still the extreme disturbance of her heart. So whilst King Arthur and King Leodegrance gave to one another words of royal greeting and of compliment, she withdrew herself, and went and stood over against the window nigh to the corner of the wall. Then, by and by, King Arthur lifted up his eyes and beheld her, where she stood afar off. So he went straightway unto her, and he took her by the hand. And he said, Lady, what cheer? And she said, Lord, I am afeard of thy greatness. And he said, Nay, lady, rather it is I who am afeard of thee. For thy kind regard is dearer unto me than anything else in all the world. Else I had not served for these 12 days as gardener's boy in thy garden, all for the sake of thy good will. And she said, Thou hast my good will, Lord. And he said, Have I thy good will in great measure? And she said, Yea, thou hast it in great measure. Then he stooped his head and kissed her before all those who were there, and thus their troth was plighted. Then King Leodegrance was filled with such an exceeding joy that he wist not how to contain himself therefore. Now after these things there followed a war with King Rience of North Wales, for Sir Kay and Sir Ulfius had gathered together a great army as King Arthur had bidden them to do, so that when King Rience came against Camelard, he was altogether routed, and his army dispersed, and he himself chased, an outcast, into his mountains. Then there was great rejoicing in Camelard, for after his victory King Arthur remained there for a while with an exceedingly splendid court of noble lords and of beautiful ladies, and there was feasting and jousting and many famous bouts at arms, the like of which those parts had never before beheld. And King Arthur and the Lady Guinevere were altogether happy together. Now one day, while King Arthur sat at feast with King Leodegrance, they two being exceedingly expanded with cheerfulness, King Leodegrance said unto Arthur, My lord, what shall I offer thee for a dowry with my daughter, when thou takest her away from me, for to be thy queen? Then King Arthur turned to Merlin, who stood nigh to him, and he said, Ha, Merlin, what shall I demand of my friend by way of that dowry? Unto him Merlin said, My lord king, thy friend King Leodegrance hath one thing, the which, should he bestow it upon thee, will singularly increase the glory and renown of thy reign, so that the fame thereof shall never be forgotten. And King Arthur said, I bid thee, Merlin, tell me what is that thing. So Merlin said, My lord king, I will tell thee a story. In the days of thy father, Uther Pendragon, I caused to be made for him a certain table in the shape of a ring, wherefore men called it the Round Table. Now at this table were seats for 50 men, and those seats were designed for the 50 knights who were the most worthy knights in all the world. These seats were of such a sort that whenever a worthy knight appeared, then his name appeared in letters of gold upon that seat that appertained to him. These seats were of such a sort that whenever a worthy knight appeared, then his name appeared in letters of gold upon that seat that appertained unto him, and when that knight died, then would his name suddenly vanish from that seat which he had aforetime occupied. Now 49 of these seats, except one seat, were altogether alike, saving only one that was set aside for the king himself, which same was elevated above the other seats, and was cunningly carved and inlaid with ivory and with gold. And the one seat was different from all the others, and it was called the Seat Perilous. For that seat was unlike the others both in its structure and its significance, for it was all cunningly inset with gold and silver of curious device, and it was covered with a canopy of satin embroidered with gold and silver, and it was altogether of a wonderful magnificence of appearance. And no name ever appeared upon this seat, for only one knight in all of the world could hope to sit therein with safety unto himself. For if any other dared to sit therein, either he would die a sudden and violent death within 3 days' time, or else a great misfortune would befall him. Hence that seat was called the Seat Perilous. Now in the days of King Uther Pendragon there sat 37 knights at the Round Table. And when King Uther Pendragon died, he gave the Round Table unto his friend, King Leodegrance of Camelard. And in the beginning of King Leodegrance's reign, there sat 24 knights at the Round Table. But times have changed since then, and the glory of King Leodegrance's reign hath paled before the glory of thy reign, so that his noble court of knights have altogether quitted him. Wherefore there remaineth now not one name, saving only the name of King Leodegrance, upon all those 50 seats that surround the Round Table. So now that Round Table lieth beneath its pavilion, altogether unused. Yet if King Leodegrance will give it unto thee, my lord king, that Round Table for a dower with the Lady Guinevere, Then will it lend unto thy reign its greatest glory. For in thy day every seat of that table shall be filled, even unto the seat perilous, and the fame of the knights who sit at it shall never be forgotten. Ha! quoth King Arthur, that would indeed be a dower worthy for any king to have with his queen. Then King Leodegrance said, that dower shalt thou have with my daughter. And if it bring thee great glory, then thy glory will be my glory, and thy renown shall be my renown. For if my glory shall wane, and thy glory shall increase, behold, is not my child thy wife? And King Arthur said, thou sayest well and wisely. Thus King Arthur became the master of that famous Round Table, and the Round Table was set up at Camelot, which some men now call Winchester. And by there gathered about it such an array of knights as the world had never beheld before that time, in which it shall never behold again. Such was the history of the beginning of the Round Table in King Arthur's reign. Chapter 6. How King Arthur was wedded in royal state, and how the Round Table was established. And now was come the early fall of the year, that pleasant season when the meadowland and the wold were still green with summer that had only just passed, when the sky likewise was as of summertime, extraordinarily blue and full of large floating clouds, when a bird might sing here and another there, a short song in memory of springtime, when all the air was tempered with warmth, and yet the leaves were everywhere turning brown and red and gold, so that when the sun shone through them, it was as though through a cloth of gold, broidered with brown and crimson and green, hung above the head. At this season of the year it is exceedingly pleasant to be afield among the nut trees with hawk and hound, or to travel abroad in the yellow world, whether it be a horse or a foot. Now this was the time of year in which had been set the marriage of King Arthur and the Lady Guinevere at Camelot, and at that place was extraordinary pomp and glory of circumstance. All the world was astir and in a great ferment of joy, for everybody was exceedingly glad that King Arthur was to have him a queen. In preparation for that great occasion, the town of Camelot was bedighted very magnificently, for the stony street along which the Lady Guinevere must come to the royal castle of the king was strewn thick with fresh-cut rushes smoothly laid. Moreover, it was in many places spread with carpets of excellent pattern, such as might be fit to lay upon the floor of some goodly hall. Likewise, all the houses along the way were hung with fine hangings of woven texture, interwoven with threads of azure and crimson, and everywhere were flags and banners afloat in the warmth and gentle breeze against the blue sky, wherefore that all the world appeared to be alive with bright colors, so that when one looked adown the street, it was as though one beheld a crooked path of exceeding beauty and gaiety stretched before him. Thus came the wedding day of the king, bright and clear and exceedingly radiant. King Arthur sat in his hall, surrounded by his court, awaiting news that the Lady Guinevere was coming thitherward. And it was about the middle of the morning when there came a messenger in haste, riding upon a milk-white steed. And the raiment of that messenger and the trappings of his horse were all of cloth of gold embroidered with scarlet and white, and the tabard of the messenger was set with many jewels of various sorts, so that he glistened from afar as he rode, with a singular splendor of appearance. So this herald messenger came straight into the castle where the king abided waiting, and he said, Arise, my lord king, for the Lady Guinevere and her court draweth nigh unto this place. Upon this the king immediately arose with great joy, and straightway he went forth with his court of knights, riding in great state. And as he went down that marvellously adorned street, all the people shouted aloud as he passed by, wherefore he smiled and bent his head from side to side, for that day he was passing happy and loved his people with wonderful friendliness. Thus he rode forward unto the town gate, and out therefrom, and so came thence into the country beyond, where the broad and well-beaten highway ran winding down beside the shining river betwixt the willows and the ashers. And behold, King Arthur and those with him perceived the court of the princess, where it appeared at a distance, wherefore they made great rejoicing and hastened forward with all speed. And as they came nigh, the sun falling upon the apparels of silk and cloth of gold, and upon golden chains and the jewels that hung therefrom, all of that noble company that surrounded the Lady Guinevere her litter flashed and sparkled with surpassing radiance. For 17 of the noblest knights of the king's court, clad in complete armor, and sent by him as an escort unto the lady, rode in great splendor, surrounding the litter wherein the princess lay. And the framework of that litter was of richly gilded wood, and its curtains and its cushion were of crimson silk embroidered with threads of gold. And behind the litter there rode in gay and joyous array, all shining with many colors, the court of the princess, her damsels in waiting, gentlemen, ladies, pages, and attendants. So those parties of the king and the Lady Guinevere drew nigh together, until they met and mingled the one with the other. Then straightway King Arthur dismounted from his noble horse, and, all clothed with royalty, he went afoot unto the Lady Guinevere's litter, while Sir Gawain and Sir Owain held the bridle of his horse. Thereupon one of her pages drew aside the silken curtains of the Lady Guinevere's litter, and King Leodegrance gave her his hand, and she straightway descended therefrom, all embalmed, as it were, in exceeding beauty. So King Leodegrance led her to King Arthur, and King Arthur came to her and placed one hand beneath her chin, and the other upon her head, and inclined his countenance, and kissed her upon her smooth cheek, all warm and fragrant like velvet for softness, and without any blemish whatsoever. And when he had thus kissed her upon the cheek, all those who were there lifted up their voices in great acclaim, giving loud voice of joy that those two noble souls had thus met together. Thus did King Arthur give welcome unto the Lady Guinevere, and unto King Leodegrance, her father, upon the highway beneath the walls of the town of Camelot, at the distance of half a league from that place. And no one who was there ever forgot that meeting, for it was full of extraordinary grace and noble courtliness. Then King Arthur and his court of knights and nobles brought King Leodegrance and the Lady Guinevere with great ceremony unto Camelot, and unto the royal castle, where apartments were assigned to all, so that the entire place was alive with joyousness and beauty. And when high noon had come, the entire court went with great state and ceremony unto the cathedral, and there, surrounded with wonderful magnificence, those two noble souls were married by the archbishop. And all the bells rang right joyfully, and all the people who stood without the cathedral shouted with loud acclaim. And lo, the king and the queen came forth all shining, like unto the sun for splendor, and like unto the moon for beauty. In the castle a great noontide feast was spread, and there sat thereat 486 lordly and noble folks, kings, knights, and nobles, with queens and ladies in magnificent array. And near to the king and the queen there sat King Leodegrance and Merlin, and Sir Ulfius, and Sir Ector the trustworthy, and Sir Gawain, and Sir Owain, and Sir Kay, and King Ban, and King Pellinore, and many other famous and exalted folk, so that no man had ever beheld such magnificent courtliness as he beheld at that famous wedding feast of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. And that day was likewise very famous in the history of chivalry, for in the afternoon the famous Round Table was established, and that Round Table was at once the very flower and the chiefest glory of King Arthur's reign. For about mid of the afternoon the king and queen, preceded by Merlin and followed by all that splendid court of kings, lords, nobles, and knights in full array, made progression to that place where Merlin, partly by magic and partly by skill, had caused to be builded a very wonderful pavilion above the Round Table where it stood. And when the king and queen and the court had entered in thereat, they were amazed at the beauty of that pavilion, for they perceived, as it were, a great space that appeared to be a marvelous land of fay. For the walls were all richly gilded, and were painted with very wonderful figures of saints and of angels, clad in ultramarine and crimson, and all those saints and angels were depicted playing upon various musical instruments that appeared to be made of gold. And overhead the roof of the pavilion was made to represent the sky, being all of cerulean blue, sprinkled over with stars. And in the midst of that painted sky there was an image, as it were, of the sun in his glory. And underfoot was a pavement of all marble stone, set in squares of black and white, and blue and red, and sundry other colors. And in the midst of the pavilion was a round table, with seats thereat exactly sufficient for 50 persons, and at each of the 50 places was a chalice of gold filled with fragrant wine, and each place was a paten of gold bearing a manchet of fair white bread. And when the king and his court entered into the pavilion, lo, music began of a sudden for to play with a wonderful sweetness. Then Merlin came and took King Arthur by the hand, and led him away from Queen Guinevere. And he said unto the king, Lo, this is the round table. Then King Arthur said, Merlin, that which I see is wonderful beyond the telling. After that, Merlin discovered unto the king the various marvels of the round table. For first he pointed to a high seat, very wonderfully wrought in precious woods, and gilded, so that it was exceedingly beautiful. And he said, Behold, Lord King, yonder seat is hight, the seat royal, and that seat is thine for to sit in. And as Merlin spake, lo, there suddenly appeared sundry letters of gold upon the back of that seat, and the letters of gold read the name, Arthur, King. And Merlin said, Lord, yonder seat may well be called the centre of seat of the round table, for, in sooth, thou art indeed the very centre of all that is most worthy of true knightliness. Wherefore that seat shall be called the centre seat of all the other seats. Then Merlin pointed to the seat that stood opposite to the seat royal, and that seat also was of a wonderful appearance, as aforetold in this history. And Merlin said unto the king, My lord king, that seat is called the seat perilous, for no man but one in all the world shall sit therein, and that man is not yet born upon the earth. And if any other man shall dare to sit therein, that man shall either suffer death or a sudden and terrible misfortune for his temerity. Wherefore that seat is called the seat perilous. Merlin, quoth the king, all that thou tellest me passeth the bound of understanding for marvellousness. Now I do beseech thee in all haste for to find forthwith a sufficient number of knights to fill this round table, so that my glory shall be entirely complete. Then Merlin smiled upon the king, though not with cheerfulness, and said, Lord, why art thou in such haste? Know that when this round table shall be entirely filled in all its seats, then shall thy glory be entirely achieved, and then forthwith shall thy day begin for to decline. For when any man hath reached the crowning of his glory, then his work is done, and God breaketh him, as a man might break a chalice, from which such perfect ichor hath been drunk, that no baser wine may be allowed to defile it. So when thy work is done and ended, shall God shatter the chalice of thy life. Then did the king look very steadfastly into Merlin's face, and said, Old man, that which thou sayest is ever of great wonder, for thou speakest words of wisdom. Natheless, seeing that I am in God his hands, I do wish for my glory and for his good will to be accomplished, even though he shall then entirely break me, when I have served his purposes. Lord, said Merlin, thou speakest like a worthy king, and with a very large and noble heart. Natheless, I may not fill the round table for thee at this time, for though thou hast gathered about thee the very noblest court of chivalry in all of Christendom, yet there are but 32 knights here present, who may be considered worthy to sit at the round table. Then, Merlin, I do desire of thee that thou shalt straightway choose me those 32. So I will do, Lord King. Then Merlin cast his eyes around, and lo, he saw where King Pellinore stood at a little distance. Unto him went Merlin, and took him by the hand. Behold, my lord king, quoth he, here is the knight in all the world next to thyself, who at this time is most worthy for to sit at this round table. For he is both exceedingly gentle of demeanour unto the poor and needy, and at the same time is so terribly strong and skilful, that I know not whether thou or he is the more to be feared in an encounter of knight against knight. Then Merlin led King Pellinore forward, and behold, the high seat that stood upon the left hand of the royal seat, there appeared of a sudden name, Pellinore. And the name was emblazoned in letters of gold that shone with extraordinary lustre. And when King Pellinore took his seat, great and loud acclaim, long continued, was given him by all those who stood round about. Then, after that Merlin had thus chosen King Arthur and King Pellinore, he chose out of the court of King Arthur the following knights, 32 in all, and these were the knights of great renown and chivalry, who did first establish the Round Table. Wherefore they were surnamed the ancient and honourable companions of the Round Table. To begin, there was Sir Gawain and Sir Owain, who were nephews unto the king, and they sat nigh to him upon the right hand. There was Sir Ulfius, who held his seat but 4 years and 8 months unto the time of his death, after which Sir Gaheris, who was his squire unto his brother, Sir Gawain, held that seat. And then there was Sir Kay the seneschal, who was foster brother unto the king. And then there was Sir Bodwin of Britain, who held his seat but 3 years and 2 months until his death, after the which Sir Agravaine held that seat. And there was Sir Pelleas and Sir Geraint and Sir Constantine, son of Sir Cadres the seneschal of Cornwall, which same was king after King Arthur. And there was Sir Caradoc and Sir Sagramore, surnamed the Desirous, and Sir Dinadan and Sir Dodinas, surnamed the Savage, and Sir Bruin, surnamed the Black, and Sir Meliot of Logres, and Sir Aglaval, and Sir Durner, and Sir Lamorach, which 3 young knights were sons of King Pellinore. And there was Sir Griflet, and Sir Ladnius, and there was Sir Griflet, and Sir Ladinas, and Sir Brandiles, and Sir Percivant of Ironside, and Sir Dennis of Cornwall, and Sir Brian of Listenhouse, and Sir Palomides, and Sir Degraine, and Sir Eponegris, son of the king of Northumberland, and brother unto the enchantress Vivian, and Sir Lamel of Cardiff, and Sir Lucan the Bodler, and Sir Bedivere, his brother, which same bare King Arthur unto the ship of fairies when he lay so sorely wounded nigh unto death after the last battle which he fought. These 32 knights were the ancient companions of the Round Table, and unto them were added others, until there were 49 in all. And then was added Sir Galahad, and with him the Round Table was made entirely complete. Now as each of these knights was chosen by Merlin, lo, as he took that knight by the hand, the name of that knight suddenly appeared in golden letters, very bright and shining, upon the seat that appertained to him. But when all had been chosen, behold, King Arthur saw that the seat upon the right hand of the seat royal had not been filled, and it bare no name upon it. And he said unto Merlin, Merlin, how is this, that the seat upon my right hand hath not been filled, and beareth no name? And Merlin said, Lord, there shall be a name thereon in a very little while, and he who shall sit therein shall be the greatest knight in all the world until that knight cometh, who shall occupy the seat perilous. For he who cometh shall exceed all other men in beauty and in strength and in knightly grace. And King Arthur said, I would that he were with us now. And Merlin said, He cometh anon. Thus was the Round Table established with great pomp and great ceremony of estate. For first the Archbishop of Canterbury blessed each and every seat, progressing from place to place, surrounded by his holy court, the choir whereof singing most musically in accord, whiles others swung censers, from which there ascended an exceedingly fragrant vapour of frankincense, filling that entire pavilion with an odour of heavenly blessedness. And when the archbishop had thus blessed every one of those seats, the chosen knight took each his stall at the round table, and his squire came and stood behind him, holding the banneret with his coat of arms upon the spear point above the knight's head. And all those who stood about that place, both knights and ladies, lifted up their voice in loud acclaim. Then all the knights rose, and each knight held up before him the cross of the hilt of his sword. And each knight spake word for word as King Arthur spake. And this was the covenant of their knighthood of the Round Table, that they would be gentle unto the weak, that they would be courageous unto the strong, that they would be terrible unto the wicked and the evildoer, that they would defend the helpless who should call upon them for aid, that all women should be held unto them sacred, that they would stand unto the defense of one another whensoever such defense should be required, that they would be merciful unto all men, that they would be gentle of deed, true in friendship, and faithful in love. This was their covenant, and unto it each knight sware upon the cross of his sword, and in witness thereof did kiss the hilt thereof. Thereupon all who stood thereabouts once more gave loud acclaim. Then all the knights of the Round Table seated themselves, and each knight brake bread from the golden pattern, and quaffed wine from the golden chalice that stood before him, giving thanks unto God for that which he ate and drank. Thus was King Arthur wedded unto Queen Guinevere, and thus was the Round Table established. Conclusion. So endeth this book of King Arthur, which hath been told by me with such joyousness of spirit that I find it to be a very great pleasure, in closing this first volume of my work, to look forward to writing a second volume, which now presently followeth. In that volume there shall be told the history of several very noble worthies who were of the court of the king. And it seems to me to be a good thing to have to do with the history of such noble and honorable knights and gentlemen. For indeed it might well please anyone to read such a history, and to hear those worthies speak, and to behold in what manner they behaved in times of trial and tribulation. For their example will doubtless help us all to behave in a like manner in a like case. And I think we will stop there for today. Next time we shall pick up with the Book of Three Worthies, starting with the story of Merlin. Until then, you can make sure to like and subscribe on any of these social media platforms, including over on Patreon. Patrons get extra bonuses like their name in the credits and videos early. This has been Classical Titerature. Thanks for watching.